Nixon.
Great to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you for coming and joining us here during this month of Ramadan, and we're in the midst of the last 10 days, Rob.
We are.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I am fasting today, so my mouth feels very dry, but I'm looking forward to breaking fast at 8:15
So
this
you're
evening.
fasting only today, or you've been doing it more often?
So I've started this week, so I always fast, and generally each year it gets longer. So I'm fasting today. So obviously 9 o'clock last night was my last food and drink, and I'm genuinely really looking forward to joining our colleagues this evening at the iftar, and then I'll see it through this week and see how we go.
That's good. Yeah, let me know how you get on, because it's very good that you are fasting so you can enjoy the experience and also do a little bit of body cleansing.
Yeah, I think the body cleansing is probably higher up than the enjoying the experience, but no, generally I think it's great. And
But to do a full detox, you need to do at least a week, 2 weeks. 1 month is even better, right? Have a go.
Have you been talking to my colleagues? Because they keep setting that challenge, so it gets longer and longer each.
Yeah, it's
each
like
time.
a little marathon, and it's very good for you. Now, we have a lot of questions today to ask of you, and maybe we can come through this together and come to some very meaningful results at the end, so that we can move forward positively together with the community. Now, all of you listening in today, I know you've been telling me to ask many questions, and you can text your questions in, and we can see what we can do to answer them. You can text them on 077 488 5505. So please do send your texts, and we can answer those questions for you. So, Rob, I'm going to go straight into it now and ask you about crime stats in the city of Leicester and the county of Leicester. So how does the city and the county fare?
Well, I think if you look at crime stats, in the broadest sense, you would see that crime is going up in terms of recorded crime, but there's lots and lots of factors that need to be understood behind that. And first and foremost, we know that several years ago the national recording standards were introduced, so that brought with it quite a changing recording practice. So quite a lot of increase of crime was as a result of new practices that were brought in around crime recording nationally. We also know that, of course, we've seen the increased presence of new and emerging crimes. So there's a lot more sort of online type cyber crime that gets recorded, which perhaps historically wasn't there. So in the broadest sense, you would say that crime rates have increased, or recorded crime has increased. But when you then look beneath that, there are certain categories of crime that have increased, and there are certain categories that have decreased. So burglary, for example, we know that if we compared ourselves to 3 or 4 years ago, we're notably down in the number of burglaries that have been reported. But if you looked at violent crime, you would say that we were increasing. But actually, when you look beneath that, a lot of that crime that is categorised as violent is often relating to really sort of very low level, and often you'll end up with multiple victims out of one incident.
Now, I'm particularly concerned about the knife crime in our city. It seems to be on the rise. Now, we have one case after another.
I think certainly in terms of knife crime, obviously you will be well aware that Leicester is one of the areas that have established the Violent Reduction Network. We've got a designated lead for knife crime, and actually knife crime in its recorded sense is fairly static. So we're not seeing a sharp increase in reported knife-related incidents, but of course there is a lot more awareness of it. So one incident can become amplified quite quickly these days through the use of social media. But what I would say to people listening to this is, in terms of knife crime per se, one, it's one of our biggest priorities. All knife crime gets responded to with a really, really serious investigation with skilled investigators linked to it. But of course, that's reacting to the problem. And what we're really keen to do is deal with the cause of the problem and go heavily into prevention, which is why we're recognised nationally as one of the leading forces around our approach to linking in with young people, looking at diversionary activities, working with education, and our Violent Reduction Network is considered to be one of the better ones in the country.
So it is here at the radio we say PRS. You're familiar with that?
No.
problem, reaction, solution.
Yes.
So we have a problem here, and we then react to that problem. But what is the solution long term? Because we are not getting to the bottom of it. What are the preventive measures that we can take collectively as a community to link up with our police force to prevent these things happening in the first place? Ideally, of course, we'd like all crimes to be prevented, but this knife crime is of very serious concern, because when you see the age group of the people, the youngsters involved with it, it is very frightening.
No, I agree, and again, hopefully you get the sentiment from me that this is something that we take very, very seriously. But do I think it is a problem that only the police can solve? No, I don't think it is. I think the police play a key and very important role in it. But actually, prevention is far better than cure. So if I look at around knife crime, well, first and foremost, we're trying to encourage people not to carry knives in the first place. So from a prevention perspective, identifying those that are more prevalent to be drawn into activity that might then require them to carry a knife. Some of that is because of the nature of the peer group that they're mixing with, some of the things that they're getting involved in. But also I think society, we are seeing a shift where it's becoming a little bit more tolerated. And I think the whole thing here is about we should never ever tolerate people carrying weapons in society. And I think society coming together, communities coming together, and really reaffirming that message of that actually don't carry a knife, because if you carry a knife, there's a greater prevalence of you're likely to use it.
So don't you feel that we need investment in this particular area, because it is security is of prime importance to have a safe community, to have people to be confident that they can walk out on the street and be safe. So what kind of investment can we put into this area?
Well, I think when you think about investment, there's investment in terms of the finance to create capacity, and often that comes from organisations that are working in this area. And I think there is an element of that, and there is a need for some of that, and that's where I talk about the additional investment that's come for the Violent Reduction Network. But my sense here is that it needs to be tackled more than just financial investment. It needs to have a step change and a commitment of communities, and it needs to be society that needs to actually step up. So there's something about the starting point of this is that actually there is a zero tolerance to anybody that is involved in street violence, carrying of weapons, for whatever the reason or motive behind it. There needs to be a zero tolerance. People need to call it out, and then action needs to be taken against it. But I think we need to really work together in order to shift the focus of that actually. And this starts from a really young age, right the way through the education process, that actually it's about how society respects and values one another and doesn't resort to carrying knives and violence.
Of course, today in the city, Rob, what is the population current from the latest census?
Well, I think when you look at the latest
population,
well, the city population is running at about 465,000. But actually, if you then look at that, what I will say to you is that we've seen a marked increase in the people in the city, and of course, one of the biggest things that we've seen is the shift in the demographic. So we've seen a significant shift in the demographic.
So I was just distracted there with message.
I'm looking at your screen.
It's a long message, that isn't it, Rob? I think this one is for you. I think it's touching to hear the sacrifice people like him take out of pure voluntary choice. Rob, is this one of your friends wrote that message in?
No, I'm obviously reading.
I'll let you read it, Rob. No, I'll read it. Salams, wow. For a Rob to fast purely voluntarily, his dedication and respect on another level. Bless him. I wish him nothing but the best in life. And if Allah wishes guidance too, I'm speechless. It's touching to hear the sacrifice people like him take out of pure voluntary service to share the struggle with us Muslims.
But I actually think there's a sentiment there. Let me just clarify why I'm fasting. I think it's important for me to fast. One, because I firstly understand it and have an appreciation for it. But I also think that I've got a number of people that work with me and for me, and I think it enables me to understand both the meaning behind the fasting, but also the impact it can have on them, and make sure that I can put in place an environment where people can work and fast and be able to live their life in the way that they want to do, to respect their culture and their faiths, and they know they're going to have the support and solidarity of me behind them. So, you know, the symbolism of me fasting, it's not a gimmick. It's about me genuinely wanting to have a heartfelt understanding of what it's like to do it, and to make sure that I then have an appreciation for how difficult and what a commitment it is.
Great. That is very wonderful to hear. Now we go back to the crime. Now I feel that those who perpetrate the crime in the city, they're getting ahead of the game, and with all the data analytics that you have at your disposal, how can we allow that to happen?
Well, I think that's a very interesting one. And so when you think about the data that we have at our disposal, I think you're right. We live in a world of data and information. What we're currently doing as a police service is starting to look and say, okay, how do we best use all of that data and information? And you will know, because I know that you're very technically informed, that you actually need the infrastructure in order to make sense of data and to interpret it and to use it in a predictive manner. So some of the things that we're starting to do in policing is to build the infrastructure that will allow us to take that data, to place it into a cloud-based solution that will allow us to then use artificial intelligence to prioritise it and to then start to use it in a more predictive way. Now, clearly, policing, like many other public sector bodies and private sector bodies, are in that they're working through how difficult a challenge that is. And of course, technology and data is moving at a significant pace. So
well, it's about 5 to 10 years ahead. In your case, maybe it's 5 years ahead. In another person who is not technically aware, technology is 10 years ahead of him.
Absolutely.
So technology today is running ahead of time. And how we can use this technology to combat some of the problems, because AI is going to take over everywhere.
Yeah, I mean,
going ahead.
I think certainly in terms of policing, and for your listeners, I think one of the key things that we will be looking to achieve is, and we're already doing this now. So we had a case recently which was a test case where we had transcription that if we were to do it manually, which has always been the case in law enforcement, that would have taken several months of time to go through and to transcribe it and then to interpret it into a different language. We took that 2 months worth of data, we placed it into the cloud, we used artificial intelligence to translate it, and it was translated within 48 hours. So 2 months to 48 hours. So technology is going to be a key driver in a world where we are seeing more data, more technology, people being connected globally to locally around and using technology. Now, a lot of that technology is fantastic and very enabling, but as you know, there will be an element of society that might choose to use that for criminal benefit.
Of course, we're going to move on now, Rob, to a very, very important part of policing. In the police force, we have these issues of equality, recruitment, what is happening. When the KC report had come out recently and about the ethnicity issues in the police force, the racism. So what are we doing about that, Rob, in the city of Leicester?
Well, let me separate out the two things. So firstly, we've got the Casey report. And as you would imagine, I've got a copy of that Casey report. We're going through it and to see what relates to the broader context of policing and what is very much Met specific. So we're going through that. What I will do is I will talk from my heart about what I believe is going on in Leicester and where I think we need to go. Look, you will be well aware I've done 3 decades in policing in Leicester. It's a place that I'm emotionally committed to, and I've seen it at every role, at every rank. I have set an ambition locally that I want us to be one of the most diverse and inclusive forces in the country. And that ambition is set on the basis that we serve one of the most diverse and, you know, the nature of our communities are diverse.
Of course, we have almost A to Z of nationalities here.
Absolutely. And I worry that actually that particularly when we come on to some of the tensions, I'm immensely proud of that diversity. And I think we're quite unique when we think about where we are in the country. So the ambition that we've set is I want us to be the most diverse and inclusive force in the country. A lot of that obviously naturally starts from within the force. So what is the force construct? How does it feel? What does it look like to work a day within Leicestershire Police? And look, I'm blessed. I sit here. I've got some amazing colleagues that I work with from all sorts of diverse backgrounds. And one of the things that we have done is we've set a really ambitious diversity and inclusion strategy. I chair a board that looks at our diversity and inclusion. I'm really well supported with, we've got networks that represent all communities. And they're not networks that I just send something to. They are networks that work with me in shaping how we are going to take the force forward. And there's been some really fantastic work done over the last few years. Everything from, we've reconfigured our recruitment team. We've got one of the most diverse recruitment teams in the country. We've reconfigured the approach that we have for when people are going through the application process. They now are allocated a mentor, a guide, a support to help them through and coach them through the process. When they first join the organisation, they're allocated again additional support, and that support follows them all the way through. We've got our networks that are representative of all the communities, and they're constantly reaching in and providing support and guidance. All of the officers across the force are getting input and training on cultural awareness, and one of the things that we're really keen to do is a lot of the design and delivery and evaluation of our training we're going to do alongside the community, so that the community can see how policing is working with them and for them, because I think and genuinely believe that's really important. And of course then, as you can imagine, working internally, we've got talent management programs, we've got mentoring and schemes to enable people to progress into positions as their career progresses. So there's a huge amount of work going on internally, but externally, what I think we're trying to do is we've been known for many, many years here in Leicester of being the force around neighbourhood policing. And I think we're now at a point where we recognise that actually the pace and the change of communities here in Leicester and Leicestershire has been rapid, very, very quick. And what we want to do now is we want to evolve the neighbourhood policing principle even further, so that we're having, this is local police working with communities on locally based solutions, but also devising and designing how policing gets delivered.
So we are looking at 1 in 4 from the BAME community. Now that is a figure that we're aiming at. What are you currently at? What is the strength of your police force currently in Leicester?
So
how many policemen you have?
So in terms of our recruitment, so the pipeline, the way to think about it is you've got a static workforce, and then you've got people that are leaving and people that are joining. So the people that are joining now, we're running at about somewhere between 20% and 25% of our intakes are now seeing somebody from a black, Asian, minority ethnic background.
So 20% would fall in line with almost the 1 in 4, yes?
Well, 25% is 1 in 4, so somewhere between 20 and 25. So I think the pipeline, we're now starting to see an increase in diverse representation joining the force as officers, and of course extend that out even further if you're thinking about staff, because we can't forget the fact that I've got 1,500 staff that work within the force as well.
In the city of Leicester?
No,
including the county?
Within the county, so city and county. So I'm responsible for the city, county and Rutland. But of course, what I would say to you, so that's the pipeline coming in, but I'm very alive to the fact that you've got a workforce. So we've been through a very unique period in time where we're seeing a lot of experienced people now coming to the end of their service and retiring. So where we're now recruiting people in, that creates a recruitment opportunity.
So there's another message there. Great to see you on community radio. So you got a lot of fans, Rob.
Well, I've got a couple.
Yeah, you got two. You haven't planted this one, have you?
No.
I have seen the police engaging a lot more with communities and listening. The dialogue needs to continue, more integration, interface, collaborative work after recent difficult times. Of course, they're referring to the recent September riot that we had here in the city. So going back to the numbers, out of 1,500, how many have you got in senior positions?
Okay, so again, when we're thinking about, so the 1,500 is staff. So I've got now, over the last few years, so I think I need to explain to listeners where we are in terms of our establishment. So in 2010, we had about 2,300 officers, and they went down to 1,750 officers by 2017 because of austerity and the cuts. Between 2017 and where we are now, we've been recruiting heavily to try and increase our officer numbers. And we are at 2,295, which is about 2,242 full-time equivalent.
So I hope Big Brother is listening out there, right? Because what Rob has just said, that the police force has decimated to 1,750, and the crime stat's gone up.
What we experienced, and I think it's a really interesting one when you think about public confidence. So between 2010 and 17, the numbers come down significantly to 1,700. At the same time, at around 2016-17, so follow me on the timeline, about 2016-17, we saw an explosion of additional requirements and safeguarding and hidden crime linked with cyber and technology. So on one hand, you've got this wicked problem of loads and loads of new crimes linked with exploitation, vulnerability, cybercrime hitting policing at the same time that you were down on your numbers. That created a pressure pot of demand. Now, I think what happened there is that naturally a lot of forces up and down the country, Leicestershire being one of them, had to start to prioritise against harm, hidden harm, threat and risk. And these were terms that were often getting used because there wasn't enough resource in order to deliver against the demand that was coming in on policing. Now, I'm pleased to say that following 2017, there was a step change where we've been able to incrementally bring the numbers of officers back up. If you ask me the question now, do I think I've got enough officers in order to meet the demand? The reality is I haven't got the same number of officers as I had in 2010, yet I've got a significant increase in demand. So you've got to be really, really efficient, and there's a constant need to reprioritise within the resources you've got.
So the point I was making was that the crime stat has gone up. The crime committed has gone up. The police force has decimated, and it is very sad because there's so much other work to do which takes away a policeman's crime fighting skills. He can't do that because he's busy doing a lot of other work.
Yeah, I mean, some of that work will be healthy work in terms of its adding value. But again, where you will see me taking the force is there will be a relentless pursuit of understanding the demand and then what is linked with crime, what is going to add value to the community. And if it's not going to add value to the community, and I can't see how it's going to reduce crime or bring offenders to justice, then I'll be challenging some of that and saying, "What, we're not going to do it." And some of that demand can come from external pressure, it can come from national pressure, it can come from community pressure. All of it requires some form of resource in order to do it. And of course, on one hand, we've just been talking about celebrating the diversity of the city. And I genuinely mean, I love this city and I'm proud of it and I'm proud of the diversity. But of course, when you've got that level of diversity, you've got a lot of celebrations, you've got a lot of events, all of which the public would expect a policing presence to be involved in the planning, the execution of it, providing reassurance patrols in order to keep people safe. So in one hand, the community dynamics have shifted significantly over in recent years. It has brought with it new and increasing demand, and our job is to work through and prioritise it and work in a really effective and efficient way. But I do think the solution is we need to do much more in partnership with the community. Rather than the community say, well, we want the police to do this, I think it's being clear about what's the effect that we're trying to create and who is best to lead on that. Some of it will be my staff, some of it might be people from the community, some of it might be people from different sectors. So I think we will go on this journey together, that there is increasing demand, increasing complexity that needs to be worked through. Some of it is absolutely rightly for the police to do. Some of it will be better placed elsewhere. And I think it's working together to get to that end result.
So today we don't have all the solutions mapped out, but certainly we can plant the seeds for development for tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're here to do. Every program that we do here, we'd like to see a result from it so that we can all move forward positively, right? So now you can see that there's a lot of lack of confidence with the public. There's culture issues within the police, lack of trust. And these are the kind of things to address that we have to overcome them once and for all. So if we are discussing things that we were discussing 50 years ago in regards to trust and confidence, then we are doing something wrong. If after 50 years we're at the same realm, then what are we doing wrong? We need to get to the root cause of the problem so we don't repeat. We've seen time and time again, this report, that report, they come 50 pages, 100 pages, then we're still discussing the same things in 2023.
Yeah.
Which is a matter of concern, that we are doing things which we should not be doing in terms of not reacting to these reports in a positive manner. I
mean, by the nature of the reports, there will always be a sense of what needs to change, because seldom have I ever seen a report in 30 years in policing which comes out which says everything's good. Generally, there will be, and often the narrative is slanted more towards the what needs to improve. And I think people working in public sector roles, high-profile leadership roles, will always recognise that, because actually this is about evolving and getting better. So I totally agree with you. We don't want to be going back over and seeing these things in several years' time. I do think we need a new, more sophisticated response to some of the issues, though, because I do think sometimes the problem that gets presented often is overly simplistic in nature. So I just think sometimes I very much welcome working with a broader spectrum of different agencies, people from the community, people from academia, to bring it together and say, okay, right, we're all looking at the same problem, but we're all looking at it from a different angle.
More so than academia, I have to say to you, Rob, that we need intelligence on the table and common sense.
Absolutely right.
Right?
Yep.
To deal with these problems. Otherwise, we're not in a secure environment, and lack of security is a big concern. We're now in difficult economic times. The crime will go up, burglaries will increase, all kind of ramifications are ahead of us that we have to see ahead of the game what the economic situation is, to where we will have to deal with that, and that is further resource that you will require to deal with that. Yeah, we have to see ahead of the game.
I think we're going to need to build capacity and capability on two levels. Firstly, can you anticipate in a period where you've got a cost of living crisis, economic issues, you've got a deep-rooted sense of inequality, because I'm seeing that there are people that are feeling deeply affected disproportionately to other people, some of it perceived, some of it actual. So I think, will that bring a demand in the short term? Yes, it will. And do we need the resource in order to respond to that? Absolutely. But I also think we need to create capacity to design out and prevent it. So you said there immediately, burglaries will go up because we've got an economic problem. Well, there's only a small minority of people that commit burglary. So actually, there is something about, well, why they're committing the burglary and understanding it. And generally, in my experience, they're either, they've got a debt they've got to pay off, and you've got to ask the question, how did they get into that debt? They've got some form of addiction, and they're committing crime in order to fuel that addiction. So I guess my logic is, okay, how do you get to stop that problem in the first place? So if they're trying to fuel an addiction, is it that we need to increase the numbers in responding to more burglaries, or is it the fact that actually we need a really timely mechanism to identify those that are likely to commit burglary, that might need some assistance, and to divert them into the right treatment really, really quickly? And I think it's probably a combination of all
it is.
of it.
There's a mission ahead, definitely.
Yep.
There's a mission ahead to be dealt with. Now, I'm going to move on now to the recent riots that took place in September in the area of Greenland Road, Belgrave Road. And this has scarred the 50 years of a diverse community in the city, because over the years, there are many new influx of immigrants that have arrived in the city. And this has absolutely taken us back in good community relationships between the Muslim community, the Hindu community. And how are we going to repair that damage?
I think the first and foremost is we need to understand the different layers that have led to that, because I don't think it's one particular issue. I think there's several issues that are intertwined that may have led to that increase in tension. But I also think that you've got there are a section of various different communities that I termed previously as they're the more vocal, they're the noisy minority. And actually, I do think we really do need to understand the sentiment of those that are perhaps the silent majority. What does the silent majority? Because I am with you. I do feel that the events of last year was sad. It was sad on several levels, because not only was it emotionally sad to watch and to see how that evolved, but it was very damaging to the reputation of Leicester, both locally, nationally, and internationally. And I think we need to come together in order to reform what Leicester stands for. So when you say to me, what do I think we need to do in order to move forward? I think there's a time where we need to almost like reset out the vision for policing, the vision for what for Leicester stands for. So as I'm going through a process of redefining what the next iteration of local policing is going to look like, how we're going to set up the infrastructure, I actually think the community and the agencies and the people that work there need to come together and say, okay, look, what does Leicester stand for? What is the vision for Leicester? Because if you said to me, what do I think the vision for Leicester needs to be, I'd say, I want to take you back to the comment that we talked about earlier, which was, we have got one of the most diverse communities in the country. Why aren't we capitalising on that? Why aren't we saying, look, Leicester is a unique and special place, and it's unique and special because of the people that are there. And actually, the people that are there need to come together now behind that new vision.
We have touched this issue of diversity in detail during this 40 minutes, but it's the issue of politicizing and having a pressure group that we had a review going to happen, and then that got squashed. It did not happen due to pressure upon one of the main persons who was going to deal with it.
Yeah.
And this kind of thing, how can it be allowed, Rob? How are you going to do your job when you got that kind of pressure coming from one entity of the community? Then we are creating a bias.
Well, I can only talk for myself, and I can only talk about how I approach it, because the presence of pressure groups, people that are more active, more vocal, I see that, I experience that. But I always come back to why I do this job and what it is that's important to me. And the reason that I do this job is because I want to make a difference to the communities of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And the only way you can do that is to be absolutely, you police without fear or favour. And I always say that, look, if somebody's done wrong, then they need to be held to account, irrespective of what community, faith, background they come from. but we fear without fear or favour, but we treat everybody with respect.
How is the independent investigation carried out by the Derbyshire Constabulary over this matter? How's that coming along?
Well, we haven't got an independent investigation carried out by Derby.
A review. I was led to believe there's a review happening,
right,
independent of Leicester Police from external source.
So people need to be clear about what the order of flow is here. So as the Chief Constable, I commissioned a review and said, I would like to understand what elements, and I asked them to look at several areas, but one was, I said I wanted the review in terms of the command structure. I wanted them to consider how we were managing local antisocial behaviour and crime. I wanted them to consider the criminal investigation into the events that took place during the disorder and subsequent to that. I also asked them to review and have a look at how we were doing our community engagement, but I also asked them to look at the public order response.
So who is actually carrying out that work?
So that's being carried out by the East Midlands. So there's a 5-force collaboration.
Yeah.
Okay, and within that, there is a team of people. They're known as the Review Unit. They are a mixture of retired officers and officers that work, and primarily their job is they come in and review serious cases on behalf of forces, on behalf of people like me that say, I've had a murder, we've had a serious incident, I'd like to come and have a look. And what we're asking them to do is have a look, tell me what's working, tell me where my blind spots are, and let me be able to then consider how we might want to evolve and take it forward. So we need to be really clear.
So there's a lot to learn from this, isn't there?
Yeah, this wasn't done to me. This was done at my request as the leader of the organisation, who said, I want to understand where we are and where I need to take the organisation going forward.
Rob, I wouldn't expect anything less from leadership here, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a message here for you. As a Muslim member of police staff, I feel even prouder to work for Leicestershire Police after hearing the Chief today. Rob's drive should be an inspiration for leaders in other organisations to empathise and make those from all backgrounds feel heard. I hope Rob's breakfast is amazing.
So do I. I'm looking forward to it.
Rob, you got a lot of fans today, right? And here's another one. Really disappointed that under Rob Nixon's temporary position, we saw 300 extremist Hindutva being protected and guarded by police with not even one photo of individuals published or arrested, whereas Muslims known to community published and put out as is prevalent with the police.
Right, well, I think
that's a long one, yeah?
That is a long one, and I don't actually think that's accurate.
How many minutes do we have?
I don't think it's accurate because we didn't see, under my leadership, me allowing. So let's be clear about the fact of what happened. So we're talking about the 300 was on the 17th of September, and I've made it really clear that the suggestion that I knew about that event in advance and that I facilitated officers to go and to march them into the high fields is.
Did you know about this buses coming from London, coach loads?
No, I'm aware that people told me that that's what happened afterwards. There's no evidence of that. There's no evidence of any coaches being hired. We identified some coaches that were hired that actually ended up going south. Nobody has actually been able to present to me any evidence of coaches turning up in Leicester. So let's deal with some of the facts on this, because I think there are people that genuinely believe that I had information and I directed officers in order to guide that group. I didn't, categorically not. It's been independently looked at. And actually the order of flow was that we had we'd been engaging with the communities for about a week. So we'd had a spike in activity around the 4th and 5th of September. We'd had lots and lots of engagement. And
we had incidents, Rob, where the mosques were being targeted, attacked, or they were ranting outside the Ashfordby Street and Green Lane areas, there was some attacks upon some individuals, some intimidation. So there was a build-up to all this.
No, that was around the 4th and 5th. I remember that, 4th, 5th and 6th. Then what we saw a decline, de-escalation in the tensions between that sort of 6th and leading up to the 17th. Now, what you've got to remember is, and I think, I remember meeting with several of the different communities and nobody ever talked about that taking place. My understanding of the 17th was that we had no direct intelligence that was going to take place, and when we did get told that there was a group gathering, local officers were deployed, and local officers then had their body-worn video on, and local officers tried to discourage them going down certain side roads.
Why did they allow them to go to Greenland Road from Belgrave?
You've got about 8 officers confronted with 300 people. You can't, there's just the dynamics of that.
So these balaclava hooded people that were marching towards Greenland Road, and 8 officers were there. So how can they, we're living in 2023 England, how can these balaclava human beings be allowed to be running amok in our city?
Well, the officers were instructed. So the officers...
That's pure intimidation. If I was there as a policeman, I'd see them to be very intimidating if I saw them like that.
And I think the officers were intimidated. And it's really interesting that some of the officers that actually were there that day that are actually now reconsidering their career in policing because of the abuse they've received from the community, when actually what they would say is they responded to an incident, a spontaneous incident, they've done their best, they've followed the instructions, they've tried to engage, and they've put their body-worn video on
Rob,
to try and record
this is a long conversation for another time, because we are nearly coming to the end.
But I do think we need to get underneath.
Oh yeah, we will do, and we will.
This is wrong.
We will do more discussion on this collectively with the other members of the community. Now, it's a short program, Rob, so we can't fit in everything.
No, absolutely not.
Now, there is one problem for you, Rob. I'm going to bring it to your attention. Do you know of a person called Dhruv Solanki? Because you know of him? Are you aware of this name?
I know the name Solanki, but...
Well, his first name is Dhruv, D-H-R-U-V. Now, yes. I want you to remember that name because he's after your job.
Okay.
And he's made it clear, and he's put it in writing there, right? He says, "Good afternoon. My name is Dhruv Solanki, and I'm 11-year student at Judge Meadow Community College. I was actually on Ramadan FM on Saturday morning and spoke about my work with Leicestershire Police and love work you are all doing. Also, I'm a East Leicester cadet working for Leicestershire Police, and I hope to become the first Chief Constable of Leicestershire Police of South Asian origin in the future." When did you say you're going to retire?
Well, honestly, I wish him well, and we've seen it here first, so I hope he does it. I genuinely hope he does it.
Well, we're going to include him in our discussions in future. Yes. Jazakallah khair, everyone. From behalf of myself and Mr. Rob Nixon, Ramadan Mubarak and Ramadan Kareem to you all.